So we have in Parshas Pinchas a very unique and challenging parsha. After HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe Rabbeinu that his time has come, right? Alei al hara avarim hazeh, and to go up and to see Eretz Yisrael, a whole thing in and of itself. Now suddenly Moshe Rabbeinu speaks to Hashem. Vaydaber Moshe al Hashem lemor. He says, Yifkod Hashem Elokei haruchos l'chol basar. Let HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yifkod means to assign, right? Hashem, who is Elokei haruchos, the God of all spirits, l'chol basar, to all flesh. Ish al ha'eda, a person in charge of the Eda. Asher yetzei lifneim, who will go out before them. Asher yavo lifneim, who will come in before them. V'asher yotziim, and will take them out. V'asher yaviim, and will bring them in. V'lotia adas Hashem katzon asher ein lahem roeh. And the people of Hashem should not be like sheep that don't have a shepherd. Okay, many questions about this. The Al Sheikh HaKadosh has a huge list of questions. Maybe I'll start with the shorter list of questions of Oheiv HaKadosh, and they somewhat overlap. First of all, our classic pasuk in the Torah, when a kid learns to learn, Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. Here we have Vaydaber Moshe el Hashem lemor. Why is that so strange? Number one, dibur, we know there are different terms for speaking. Dibur is lashon kosher. That's when you're speaking tough, so to speak. Amira is lashon raka. Vayomer, here Hashem speaking to Moshe in the terms of Vaydab, to Hashem. Moshe is speaking to Hashem in terms of Vaydaber. You see, I can't even get it out of my mouth, right? This flip.
But when it says lemor, isn't that the rachbar?
Well, the problem is, usually lemor means, like Vaydaber Hashem Moshe lemor, Hashem spoke to Moshe to tell him to tell, let's say, Daber o b'nei Yisrael. Here, who is he telling Hashem to tell? The lemor doesn't seem to fit, right? He says, Oheiv HaKadosh, ein lo mashmos, it has no meaning here. Kel Elokei haruchos, a very unique name of Hashem, right? Elokei haruchos. Why? Why specifically here? And then the description of what the leader should do seems to be repetitive. It says, Asher yetzei lifneim, will go out before them, Asher yavo lifneim, will come before them, Asher yotziim, and who will take them out, Asher yaviim. It says, what is all that adding, doing? And then, Velotia adas Hashem, and so the nation of Hashem shouldn't be katzon asher ein lahem roeh, like sheep that don't have a shepherd. He asks, he says, did he really think that Hashem would leave Am Yisrael without guidance? First of all, our ultimate shepherd, so to speak, is Hashem. David HaMelech said, Hashem roi lo yechsar. Right? That's always we have Hashem. And why is he, so to speak, suspecting HaKadosh Baruch Hu of leaving Am Yisrael leaderless, that he has to tell them? It's very difficult. So we'll explain the Oheiv HaKadosh's approach a bit before we move on to some others. So he said Moshe Rabbeinu was speaking harshly because he had just been informed he's going to die. And Moshe Rabbeinu said, I see a danger to Am Yisrael when I die unless this is taken care of. Meaning, right? He says the kavana was shelo yamus, right? That he says, I don't want to die until you find the person that fulfills these requirements. So why was he speaking hard? He said it was chiba v'rachmanus al Yisrael. There are different emotional motivations when we speak with great passion. Sometimes I'm angry, sometimes it's self-interest, but sometimes because I love and have mercy for someone else. So here he was looking at Am Yisrael and he was speaking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu like this, with this love and rachmanus. He says, Ein tachlis omid b'mamar el b'mischayev min ha'maimer. He says what Moshe Rabbeinu was talking about, it wasn't so much what he was saying, but what was coming out of what he was saying. Meaning that he says Hashem has to find someone that can connect, so to speak, with all of Am Yisrael, who are so different. The ruach, the spirit of a person is always different. when the Ruach is combined with the Basar, we are so complex. Because Mafli Lassos, we have a Nefesh that's united with the Guf, and that brings itself out in each of us in so many different ways. And there's so many different Madregas in Am Yisrael. And Moshe Rabbeinu was, so to speak, able to be kolel, to include all of Am Yisrael in this way, to be connected to them all. But he says the idea of Asher Yitziim Asher Yaviim says it has to be someone that Yeh lo rotzon bohem. Asher Yetze lifnehem means he's going out before the people, means he wants the people, he loves the people. Vasher Yotziem, that means that they will want to go with him, right, and come with him. That's the doubling of what's going there. It's supposed to be mutual, that the leader loves the people, that he wants to do it, and they want to do what he wants to do. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu, out of his worry for Am Yisrael, because this is a very unique thing, to be able to have such a person, such a leader, is very, very difficult. But then when he was told it was Yoshua, then he agrees, Beseder, my time has come. Okay, there are more. Al Shechas, didn't Moshe Rabbeinu already hear from Eldad and Medad and Baaloscha that Yeshua was going to take them into Eretz Yisrael? There are endless questions which are there, but I'd like to get into another approach. The Kedushas Levi Yitzchak Berditchev. So he gives here this picture of a Jewish leader in many ways. On this pasuk, Yifkar Hashem Elokei Aruchos L'chol Basar, he says, Haklal, Yesh Limod Zchus Al Yisrael, Mashe'enu Moisim Rodzon Abori B'Tmidus Kamalochim. What's Moshe Rabbeinu saying? Rabbi Yitzchak, again, I always like to clarify the historical picture. He was the constant defender of HaKadosh Baruch of Am Yisrael before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And there are countless stories about him. You know, this man is out there in his talis and tefillin greasing his axle wheels, and somebody said, isn't that a chutzpah? He says, no, look, even when he's greasing his axle wheels, he's davening to Hashem. You know, and all these different, there was one I heard from Shom Shvadron Zatzal. He said that somebody was complaining in Shul, the Chazan davened so fast. He said, listen to him, it's like, blah, 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 blah. So Rabbi Yitzchak said, when a father comes home, and his little child comes running over to him, babbling, doesn't he pick him up? Doesn't he hug him? Doesn't he dance with him? Reb Shalom said the answer to that is, it's cute when he's 3. It's not so cute when he's 25. That's what he said. But, so all these stories, but you should know he was a Rav of a town, and he was a very strong fighter for everything that was right, and a very strong fighter for everything, against everything that was wrong. He was not a pushover, right? And in fact, the Rebbe said that oftentimes the tzaddikim who were, melamed zchus constantly about Am Yisrael to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the people didn't know that. Sometimes he was rebuking them. He said, take the example of what happened to Shmuel and Shaul. HaKadosh Baruch Hu came to Shmuel and said, right, that's it, Shaul is not going to be king anymore. So Shmuel spent the whole night crying before Hashem that Shaul's mamlacha should continue. But the next day when he came to Shaul, he gave it to him. Right? It was the two things are able to be there simultaneously when you had to. So he says a manig needs to be melamed zchus, and the ikar limud zchus has to be. He says, you know why we don't do things like malachim? Malachim are constant. A malach exists to do Ratzon Hashem and does Ratzon Hashem. That's his whole existence. Why aren't we like that? Ma'achim Hashem trudim parnasosam. We are so busy just trying to live. Now, parnasa doesn't just mean food. It just doesn't mean earning a living. It means everything we need to do to manage in this world. He says, this is why Avram Avinu, who was such an ish chesed, when the malachim came, he's saying he knew they were malachim, but he gave them food. Why? He wanted to tell them. He says, look at this. He says, you don't have to get this stuff. He says, but all the people are basav adom. They have to go out with Mesiras Nefesh and spend their mind and their hearts and their strength trying to get food for all these things. So you should remember this and never be mekatrik, never prosecute human beings because of this. So that's why he says, Yifkod Hashem Elokei Aruchos L'chol Basar. Right? In other words, that the Shofet Umanig, the leader, has to always be able to defend Am Yisrael in this way. That if someone who isn't serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu constantly, right, so therefore he will know to have patience with them and to defend them and to be melamed zchus on Am Yisrael. Now, it's interesting, Ger Rebbe, the Beis Yisrael, in this edition of the Kedushas Levi, they bring from other Sfarim where they quoted the pieces from the Kedushas Levi. So here in Pinchas, they bring from the Beis Yisrael. Pinchas. He says, he adds on, he says that Elokei Ruchos means that the leader, it's true, he has to defend Am Yisrael, that they have to get Gashmias, but it's also Asher Yetzi Lifneim v'Asher Yovu Lifneim means that he'll be able to get them to be Makabel O Malchus Shamayim, to be serving Hashem while they're working on their livelihood. Meaning he'll go out with them when they have to go out into the world, when they have to be earning their parnasa. He will help make sure, right, that they maintain their Avodas Hashem. And if they fall, right, somehow it's v'yiviyim. He'll bring them back into Kedusha. Okay? And this is the Mesiras Nefesh that the leader has to have. The Tiferes Shlomo, we might look at it more in a second, the Radomsky says that the leader has to not only be a leader of spirit, has to take care of them in Gashmias. Last week we brought that statement from the Kloisenberger Rebbe. That was why he made the Lanyado Hospital. He says, I didn't come just to take care of Am Yisrael's nefesh. You have to take care of the nefesh and the guf. So he says, but he says the Beis Yisrael, the Ikar HaMechuvan should be the leader has to make sure that while Am Yisrael will be successful in Gashmias, have Shefa in Gashmias, but it won't damage them. Like it says, Vayishman Yeshurun Vayivot, if Yeshurun gets fat, he kicks. So this is why Elokei HaRuchos L'chol Basar, that it should always be that Hashem, right, who has given us the Ruchnius, that should always be ruling over the Basar, over the flesh. And he said, and this is something that Yeshua was able to do. So this is Reb Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, and this is the idea of defending. Now, somewhat back to the beginning of the Parsha, there's a fascinating message I heard from the Talmud Rebbe. He said that he was in 10th grade, he became a Ger Chassid, and he came very close with the Beis Yisrael. So he said he was with the Beis Yisrael pre-dawn. Pre-dawn were the Ger Rebbe's office hours. And Ger, you were supposed to go to bed on time, and he expected that if he wanted to see you, you'd be in the Beis Medrash at 4:30 or something like that. So he was with the Ger Rebbe in his house. It's pre-dawn. And the Rebbe looked out the window. And at that time, there was like one person who was the one who put up all the signs, that hold up the walls of Yerushalayim. His name was Noach Klepfer. And he was putting up some big signs. So the Rebbe sent one of the Shamoshim. He said, go see what it's about. So he came back. He said, "Does from the Kanoim." He said, this is from the Kanoim, the Zealots. Some poster they wanted to put up. So the Rebbe repeated the word. He said, Kanoim. He said, I'll tell you a story. He said something that I heard, a vort, I heard from someone who was named Shlomo Kotzker, and he was a grandson of the Kotzker Rebbe. And he said the following in the name of his grandfather. He says, why is Moshe Rabbeinu here asking Hashem for a leader here in Parshas Pinchas? It says, Ish al ha'eda, right, when he says a man who can be in control, so to speak, over the Eda, he was hinting to Pinchas, right, that he felt that Pinchas has shown himself he could be a leader, right? He says, it's gefällt him. He said he liked what he saw in Pinchas. HaKadosh Baruch Hu answered, he said like this, Akanoi ken kein manig nicht sein. He says, a zealot cannot be a manig, cannot be a leader. He has his tafkid, right? Pinchas definitely had his tafkid, he had what's there, but can't be the leader. He said, that's not the derech for the rabbim. A person has to know how to be able to, so to speak, come down and connect with the people that he's in charge of, and to be able to help him and to help them in these ways. Now, I just opened today, HaKadosh Baruch Hu often helps me. I walked into a shul, and I opened up a sefer. It was a biography of the Zviller Rebbe that I hadn't seen before, Shlomo Zviller. And it had a whole chapter of his being Melamed Zchus, right? Different ways in which he defended Am Yisrael and loved Am Yisrael in so many different ways. And this one was particularly interesting. We go back to pre-state in Eretz Yisrael, and the British were ruling here, and there were these groups, right, that fought against the British, the Lehi and the Etzel, and they were like paramilitary groups that were fighting against the British to try and get them to leave. And they would even assassinate, okay? And these were things that they did. Now, it's interesting, he said, sociologically, again, these people were usually not religious, right? But many religious people, because they were suffering under the British, they joined up. And he said, and therefore there were families in Yerushalayim that the people who joined up sometimes left Yiddishkeit, even though, he said, it's interesting, in areas like Tel Aviv, there the people who assisted them remained religious. He said somehow there was a better infrastructure for them to be able to do that. Be it as it may, he said they kind of kept away from this for a few reasons, among the Yerushalmim, what you call. On one hand, they didn't like it that they weren't religious and they saw people getting close to them and getting less religious. Number two is, it was always a debate whether what they were doing was correct, right? Assassinating assorted British officials or things like this, is that a correct thing to do? Does it bring more danger to Am Yisrael? Because the British there would be reprisals, right? When you read about Rabbi Levine, he was very involved with these prisoners. Anyway, so there were two young men who were in one of these groups, and they went to Egypt and they assassinated the British foreign minister, Lord Moyne. Okay, they were arrested. The Egyptians arrested them, handed them over to the British, and they were in prison under a death sentence. So at that time, Shlomo Zeviller was famous that if you asked him a question, he would go to the mikveh, and then he would give you the answer. Right? Some other times it would be, he could look into a certain sefer or something, but his avodah a lot was done at the mikveh. So his famous shamash, who was a Talmud Chacham in his own right, Rebel Yerot, he asked Rebel Yerot, he says, every day when I'm in the tefillah in the mikveh, it's called the Yishuv, that's where his mind would get settled in the mikveh, he should mention the names of these boys for Yeshua and Rachmi. And then it was one Shabbos, at this time I was in Shalosh Shudas, and there was something that shocked people a lot. He didn't have the custom of saying Torah at Shalosh Shudas. In general, he didn't speak publicly at all. That wasn't his avodah. And then suddenly he spoke, and he started to speak about the zchus of these two young men. And many people heard about this. And on Sunday, after Mincha, somebody, a very chashuv person named Ephraim Zalman Halperin, who was close to the Rebbe, he says, I have to complain. He says, even though I ask you mechila, but how did you say that? He says, it's like you're endorsing what they did, right? With this action, they put all of us in danger. So the Rebbe said, what I said yesterday, I say again today. He says, Avraham Avinu Olav Hashalom in the Akedah, put into Am Yisrael, like the genes, the power of Mesiras Nefesh for Am Yisrael. That a Jew has the ability to give himself over for Am Yisrael. And he says that remains with us all generations. What those boys did, in them I see them being Moser Nefesh for Am Yisrael. So therefore, he says, what I said yesterday, I say today. You're going to tell me that I'm encouraging these actions? He said, look, they didn't ask me. I didn't tell them to do it. Right? What do you want from me? He says, their officer, their commander told them that this would help Am Yisrael, this would help Klal Yisrael. If they did it, and that's Mesiras Nefesh, and that's why I say what I said. And many, many things like this. He never wanted to hear anything negative about other Jews in any ways. So this is just a picture of one who's always melamed zchus in so many different ways. Let's go now maybe to the Ksav Sofer. The Ksav Sofer, right, the son of the Chasam Sofer in Presburg. So he had another fascinating diuk. It's interesting, both he and the Ben Ish Chai in Baghdad had the same diuk in the Pasuk. Right, he said, V'lo yia Yisrael, right, sorry, the actual Pasuk, it says, right, you should have this leader, right, V'lo tia adas Hashem katzon asher ein lohem roeh. Now, first of all, why is he bringing the mashal of the sheep? You have to give Hashem mashalim to understand something. Think of a sheep and a shepherd and a flock. If you don't give them a leader, like I'm saying, they're going to be like a flock without. You have to give mashalim to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it's wordy. Why don't you just say, right, katzon asher, right, katzon beli ro'eh, like sheep without a shepherd. What is like sheep that they don't have to them a shepherd? So the Ksav Sofer explains like this. He says, Asher yetze lifneim. I'm sorry. Yifkar Hashem Elokei Aruchos. So he says, in general, a shepherd who takes care of the sheep. You know why he's taking care of the sheep? He wants to make money, or he wants to eat sheep, or he wants to have wool. He's taking care of himself. He's not really taking care of the sheep. He says it's laharbos hono rechusho. So he says he's only doing it for himself and his own benefit. Where do you see that come into play? If suddenly there's sakonas nefesh, right, a pack of wolves comes down on the sheep, he's going to be out of there, right? And the sheep will have to deal for themselves. It says, Lo chen ya'aroi Yisrael. But a shepherd for Am Yisrael should not be like that. He is going to be moser nefesh for the tzon kadoshim that are Am Yisrael. And this also explains in the Medrash the strange midrashim about our leaders who are moser nefesh for the sheep. Meaning Moshe Rabbeinu, the famous Medrash, right, that one of the lambs ran off from the flock and he ran after him and he saw the lamb came to a water hole and he said, "Oh, I didn't realize you were thirsty. I feel so bad in here." And he carried him back to the flock. Right? What did we learn from that? David HaMelech is in the Psukim. This I mentioned, I heard from Rav Yeshua Bachrach, that David HaMelech tells Shaul, when I was a shepherd and a lion would attack or a dove would attack, a bear would attack, I would kill him with my bare hands. So he asked, do we need Meshugoyim? Right? What are you doing? Right? He's coming to eat a sheep and you're fighting a lion, you're fighting a bear, you're risking your life. But he said that's this picture somehow of the leader for those that he's in charge of. He has this feeling of Mesiras Nefesh. He doesn't make cheshbonos. So he says this is a leader that has to be, and even in time of danger, he will lead them, he will go in front. Not like the Ro'et Son who's going in the back of them just in case if some lions or bears want to come and have lunch, he'll be far away from where that is. He says that's why Lotia Adas Yisrael Katzon Asher Ein Lahem Ro'eh. That's the word Lahem. They have a shepherd, but the shepherd isn't for them. The shepherd's for himself. He says, Rebbe Shalom, you have to give them a leader with that level of Mesiras Nefesh, right, that it'll be for them in all cases. It's interesting that he has another piece where he says this idea of Asher Yetze Lifneim, Asher Yovel Lifneim comes to negate the idea of constitutional monarchy. He said there's some kings, yeah, they're the king, but they're limited by the rules of the land, by the parliament, by the elders, by the who knows what. He says no. He says it has to be a king who can do entirely what he himself is supposed to do. Okay, now the Oheiv Yisrael of Apta, he brings like this. Says the tzaddik is supposed to be Osa Bishvil Zera Yisrael Shnei Dvarim. Says the tzaddik is supposed to be doing two things for Am Yisrael. One, that he's Davuk Tamid B'Sichlo B'Noam Elyon. He's constantly connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he's in Dveikus in a very high place. But Im Kol Zeh, nonetheless, because of Avos Yisrael, he's Morid Umashpil As Atzmo Midveikus Shelo Lifamim. He steps down from that. And he's mashgiach al tzorchei zera Yisrael, and he looks for the needs of Am Yisrael in all ways. Lahashlim chesronim, to be able to make sure they have what they're missing, right? And this is both in Gashmius and in Ruchnius. And the Tiferes Yisrael says, in a somewhat similar vein, right? He says that he's going to Asher Yovo Lifneim, right, the idea of with Mesiras Nefesh, and he's going to go before them with self-sacrifice, and he's going to take care of them with his zechuyos, meaning the things that he's doing that elevate him, he's doing to be able to help Am Yisrael, and he's going to bring them to where they have to go, even though he himself may sometimes lose out from those things that he's doing. He also brings the idea, right, that the Tzaddik Ador is someone who comes into the world for the Rabbi, right? He's a Isha Sheruach Bo. He's a person who comes down into this world just in order to help others. And he says, this is Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was created for Am Yisrael. That's who he was. That was Miriam's nevuah. She said, Osid imi sheteled ben she'yoshias Yisrael. My mother's going to give birth to a child who's going to be Moshiach Am Yisrael. Meaning that was his job title. That was his name, Moshiach Shel Yisrael. So that is the level of Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, it says Moshe Rabbeinu kipnei achama, that Moshe Rabbeinu was like the sun and Yoshua was like the moon. And there, it was needed when they went into Eretz Yisrael, that Yoshua had to have a level where he was able to be even closer to the people and their needs to be able to make sure of what they had. But the goal is, in all cases, both for the physical needs and the spiritual needs of Am Yisrael. So if we sum up what we've seen, Moshe Rabbeinu here was, when he was asking that Hashem make a leader, it was all out of love and concern for Am Yisrael. And that was why he spoke so passionately, even in the surprising way of Vaidaber, right? And Lemor, meaning that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should say what is going to be done. And to the point that he was Mofet Masonev saying, I don't want to die. You told me it's time for me to die. I don't want to die until this happens. And I saw one Sefer brought down, where it says Moshe was misave to the Misa of Aaron. The Torah gives us great detail about the death of Aaron, because it was a picture, there was no resistance. Once HaKadosh Baruch Hu let him know that he fulfilled his tafkid, he had no resistance to leaving the world. Right? That was, Moshe Rabbeinu here felt this was part of his tafkid that he had to see. And that leader has to be a person who knows how to defend Am Yisrael. It has to be a person who is able to connect to all of Am Yisrael, and who realizes his responsibilities to defend them and to take care of them in all ways, even if that means he has to sometimes go down from his madrega. So what does all this have to do with us? So the Beis Yisrael says this applies to every person in their lives. Everybody is a leader in one way or another. And you have to realize, whatever leadership that is in your family, in your company, in your shul, in whatever it is, that doesn't mean a power trip for you. That means you're Eved La'am Hashem. You're served for them. Rav Wolbe said a beautiful thought. He says, institutions, yeshivas, seminaries always talk about accepting a student. Will we accept this student? And what they mean is, will we give this student the privilege of entering our institution? He says, that's not the type of accepting it should be. To be makabel a student means I'm makabel of them on myself, to take care of them and to do what's best for them, when they're good and when they're not so good, when they're talented and when they're less talented. Realize that that's the achrayus, you're being makabel on yourself. That's acceptance, which is there. And that doesn't go away once you take them in, right? Then you have to always care and think what they're doing. Tony Rebbe emphasized that the Beis Yisrael, if ever a boy had to be sent out of yeshiva, he always worried about where he's going after that and tried to make sure, right, where he's going and what's going to be happening with him. Not just, you're out. May we have HaKadosh Baruch Hu continue to give us, like he does every door, leaders who guide us and take care of us.